so alone, so no one cared. You came along, gave me a song to ease the pain and erase the strain. With your one, but you promised me. Against all odds, I made the choice to give you my trust. Now I rejoice. You answered my prayer. Not a moment too soon. No way I am ready. My sins you erase. You said me. No with no one. No one to care. You promised me you'd be there where I go. Amen. God bless you. I want to thank you for joining me for another episode of Pastor's Chat on tonight. And the thing is I know you know that here in Chicago, we're in day 2 of the teachers' strike here. And the thing about it is I want to keep it before you because I don't want you to lose track on what is really going on here. We have a lot of things being said on both sides. But the thing is that I don't want us to really begin to lose track and understanding that everything that's being done is being done for our children. It's not being done for the teachers. It's really being done for the children. And there has to be benefits on both sides. So what I'm saying is that when we look at this, the teachers are fighting for smaller classrooms. And in fighting for smaller classrooms, you know, how can you really function when you have anywhere from 35 to 40 children in any classroom? How can you really begin to do any teaching when you're really dealing with a plethora of issues that may be going on within that classroom? Anytime you deal with 20, 25, I mean, that's a pretty high number. But the thing about it is it's a manageable number. But when you look at how many individuals, how many kids they're trying to put within a classroom, we have to understand that our children are the ones that will not get the instruction that they need. They will not get the help that they need. Because how do you have 40 children to every one child? So when you look at this, the thing is that teachers are fighting for the future education of our children. And a lot of times what we fail to realize is that in the direction that everything is going on in these days, that everybody's trying to move towards privatizing everything, getting companies to buy into everything, selling everything. You got to understand, even ballparks these days are being sold to companies and being named after companies. You know, who remembers when Comiskey Park was named after the owner of the White Sox? Now, the owner of the White Sox has sold the naming rights of White Sox Park to Sawyer Field. So the thing is that everything is moving towards being owned by corporations. If you got the money, you can buy it. But that's the direction that they're attempting to take our schools. They're attempting to take out the public school system and privatize everything that is going on. The thing is also within that, you know, we have to look at the fact that our children don't have current materials that they need, the current books that they need, the current workbooks that they need. And another thing is that when you go to some of these schools, and I'm going to say up north, these schools are highly air conditioned. They're cool. Kids can go in and have a learning environment. We are in a situation now where individuals come to school like we had a hot summer. And we had 90-degree weather almost every day. And then before that, it was even starting to get hot before the kids got out of school. These kids had to stay in classrooms with no air conditioning. And if you think about it, if it's 98 degrees outside, and then on the inside, you got all these people crammed into one room, that room is over 100 degrees. How do you expect a child to even function under that? How do you expect a child to be still under that? A lot of us adults have a hard time even being still under that. So when we look at this, we need to upgrade everything that is going on within our schools. We need to stop waiting 6 weeks into the school year before our children receive books. And when they receive the books, they're so old that, I mean, they date back 10 years. But I can guarantee you that if you go to a school up north, that those schools up north aren't suffering a bit. You know, I was reading through MSNBC today on the web, and they had teachers from around the country that were chiming in. But, you know, they got overwhelming respect. The teachers have to know that there are people that are behind them and what they're doing. But you have those individuals who are just plain out negative about it. You know, you have one lady who says she's a teacher. She's a teacher here in Illinois. And the thing about it is that she would never walk off her job, even if it meant money. But I had to look at it. At the end of the comment, she teaches in suburbs. And I have to admit, I'm from the suburbs. And in the suburbs, they're not suffering. They have everything current. They have everything that they need. We're talking about, it's like apples and oranges. Come on now. You know, you out there teaching in a nice plush classroom where we're here in Chicago, and you go into some of these classrooms haven't been updated, and I don't know how many years. So when we look at the whole picture, you know, these teachers have a right to be doing what they're doing. And when we have a mayor that says it's a strike of choice, yes, it's a choice. It's a choice that the mayor made to back off of the teachers and say, you know what? I'm not going to give you what you want. I'm not, in actuality, he's saying, I don't care about the student. I don't care about what's going on in your life. It's about what he wants and what he wants alone. He doesn't care about anybody else. He doesn't care about the education or the future of the children in this city. It's easy to say I care out of my mouth, but don't care in your heart. So when we look at this whole thing, you know, closing 100 schools, you got to give me a break. To close 100 schools means that you're displacing, you're taking kids out of their neighborhood. You're going to bust them into schools where they're more likely going to run into other gang members. They're more likely going to run into individuals that spend a majority of their time fighting to stay in school and fighting when they get out of school, fighting before school, because Chicago is such a split city. Gangs have taken over to the point to whereas we had a young lady, and you probably heard me say it before, a young lady said if they close her school, she won't go to school because she's afraid of crossing gang lines. When we start listening to our children, when we start understanding what they're saying, they're pleading to us for us to help them that they may receive. These kids want to go to school. Do you think right now that these kids want to be out of school? Right now, do you think the teachers want to be out of school? The teachers want to be in there doing what they love to do, teach. We had individuals at one time, there was a flood of individuals that left the corporate life to go to school to get their teacher certification that they may turn around and teach. And now they left their nice plus jobs to come and teach at Chicago public schools, but then they turn around and turn their backs on. Because we have individuals who really don't know the city. We have individuals who really don't know the system. How can you have people come and then negotiate a contract that are really buying into the charter school system? Some of them already own, probably got stock in some of these charter schools. Some of them already are probably a part of a group that has a charter school. But when we look at the whole picture, you know, the children are the ones suffering. They're suffering in these classrooms. The teachers are suffering trying to teach them, trying to get them on the high scores. But how can you do it when everything you have is inadequate? How can you help somebody when you don't have the tools you need to help them? And the thing about it is, I can say right here and without reservation, I know teachers spend a majority of their money that they make from being teachers to make sure that their students got what they need in the classroom. They spending their own money, making sure that the walls are decorated, making sure that the children have a learning environment, doing the best they can with what they have. And when they ask for what it is, the first thing they say is that there's a budget problem. There's a budget problem everywhere. But when it comes to education, we can't cut our children short. And that's what they're doing here in the city. They're cutting our children short. You know, the children are even online. The children are out there with the teachers marching. The children are down there when they rally downtown. This is not just the teachers. It's parents. It's children. It's individuals that care. You know, it's a shame that now we got children coming from overseas taking the engineering jobs that should be here for our children. But because our children aren't being properly educated, because our children don't have what they need, because our children aren't able to go to college and do some of the things, they're coming to take the jobs that are rightfully theirs. Because we have systems like this. We have systems that are broken. We have processes that are broken. We have individuals that are broken. Because a process is only put in place by the people that do it. And as they even sit at the table now, they're sitting at the table to try and hash this thing out. They're sitting at the table to try and get the teachers back into the classroom. But this isn't about teachers. This is about the students. This is about job security. You know, what they're trying to do is they're trying to get some structure in place, some guidelines, some procedures, some stipulations put in place before a teacher can be fired. They're trying to get some things in place to whereas individuals don't have to worry about because their scores might not be that high this time. But then the time before that, they were very high. But this time they're very low. And then they turn around and want to fire them because they're talking about they got low scores. This is a process that is really broken. How can you evaluate a teacher based on a student's performance and that student and they take into account in that teacher's evaluation where that child comes from? You know, that child's home environment. You know, some kids moving from school to school. Some kids got family issues. Some kids got who knows what type of issues going on in their home. But the thing about it is that when a teacher gets evaluated on what's going on in a children's home, what's going on in a child's neighborhood, how can you hold an individual accountable that doesn't even live with that individual? How can you hold them accountable? There was a story told, excuse me, there was a story told where an actual teacher told this story, not here in Chicago, but this happened in the country, where she said this young lady's child was really acting up in the classroom and he was failing. So she asked the mother to come in for a parent-teacher conference. And so when the parent came in, they sat down and she began to tell the parent about the poor performance that the child was having in the classroom. And the mother just sat there and nodded her head, yes, 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 we'll work on it. We'll work on it. And then all of a sudden she said, and by the way, did you know your son brought a game to school and was playing a game in school instead of studying? And do you realize she goes on to talk about how that mother stood up and snapped on her son, beat her son because her son brought a game to school, but didn't care about the performance of that child. But then you want to turn around and you want to have it evaluated, a child evaluated. I mean, a teacher, a teacher evaluated by what's going on in a child's home. You just can't do it. Being a child these days isn't like it was being a child back in the 60s and 70s. Being a child today is much rougher than it was being a child back then. Back then, parents really held their children accountable. I have to tell you a personal story. When I was in about the third grade, I was a pretty bad child. And my mother had to leave her job one day to come to the school and to meet with my teachers. And when she came to the school, she asked me a question, and I'll never forget this. She asked me simply to say my ABCs. And I couldn't say my ABCs. And my mother whooped me right there in the classroom. She didn't care what the principal thought. She didn't care what the teacher thought. What she cared about was the fact that I wasn't getting the education that I needed. And it wasn't the teacher's fault that I wasn't getting it. It was my fault. And she held me accountable on the spot. So how can you have a part of a teacher's evaluation in relationship to what's going on in a child's home? That's just not fair. You can't evaluate a person off of what's going on in somebody's life. They do their best when that child comes to school. The teacher does their best to try and deal with that child's personal life. How do you deal with a child who comes to school with the same clothes on 3 days in a row, 4 days in a row? How do you deal with a child who comes to school and hasn't eaten in 2 days, but then comes to school to eat? Are you going to evaluate a teacher based on what's going on in a child's life at home outside of school? That's not fair. And then you turn around and yes, you give them 3%, 4%. But then according to the plan that they want to give the teachers with their medical costs, that's not a raise. Because what's going to happen is that 3% of that 4% is probably going to be taken up by the cost of the medical. All they're doing is giving them a raise to pay for the medical. And these are the things that we have to look at when it comes to a teacher being in the classroom. These teachers love these children. I know firsthand. This isn't about money. This is about making sure that their child has what they need. This is about making sure that that teacher can go to school and teach and not worry about the security of their job. Because they went to school. They did everything that they asked. And teachers are going out getting these national certifications because they asked and they're striving to be all that they can be. But then you turn around and tell them they're not being all that they can be. That's not fair. It's not fair to the student and it's not fair to the teacher. It's not fair to the parent. We have some parents who really, really are striving for their child to do the right thing. But then when you have a system that is broken, that's trying to break the teachers, but it's not about the teachers. It's about breaking a union. It's about breaking the back of individuals who are put in place to protect the teachers. It's about breaking them. What do you do about that? Do you continue to strike? Do you go back to the classroom and let individuals continue to walk over you? The thing is that the teachers here in Chicago are being supported all around this country. They're being supported all around this world. Because if you can take one of the third largest districts in this country and allow it to go on strike, a first-year mayor, a first-year CEO of Chicago Public Schools. Chicago Public Schools haven't had a strike, haven't had a strike in 25 years. And now they're striking. They're in day 2, pushing into day 3. Quit saying, Mayor, that they're striking by choice. They're striking because they were pushed to strike. Because you're not being fair when it comes to the teachers. You're not being fair when it comes to the students. You're not being fair. And yes, they talk about your children ought to be in the classroom. Yes, you can afford to send your child to private school. But what about those thousands of parents that can't and only want their child to have is the same type of education they had in Chicago Public Schools? Chicago Public Schools used to be one of the most respected districts in this country because of the simple fact of the individuals that were over it. The individuals that went down to Springfield and lobbied. The individuals who came up through the system, whose parents were teachers and they became teachers, and then they understood where the teachers were coming from. When you get back to those values, when you get back to respecting teachers, when you get back to respecting the students, when you get back to being fair to everybody across the board, it's just not about the kids that live on the north side. It's just not about the kids that live on the east side. It's not about the kids on the west or the south side. It's about being fair all the way across the board. And when we look at this, one of the schools that were brought up in the conversation today was Walter Payton School. Walter Payton wasn't from the north side. Walter Payton spent a lot of his time on the south side, but the school was put on the north side. Growing up and working at the cleaners, I used to drop laundry off at Walter Payton's house. And the few times that I did have a conversation with him, because he lived in Barrington, I know where he lives. One of the few conversations that I had with him is that he always had a heart for the children that were on the south side and the west side. But then the school that's named after him is on the north side. And I'm saying facts, what I know, from holding face-to-face conversations with him. I used to drop off his dry cleaning. I used to pick up his dry cleaning at his home. So when you look at this, it's those type of things that are being done. Everybody needs to be treated fairly across the board. And I just have one more thing to say before I close this out. You can't get things done if you're steady courting Fortune 500 companies. It may be about bringing jobs to Chicago, but I think it's also about getting them to buy into charter schools. You can be very happy, Mayor, about being very productive in the unemployment rate down in Chicago. But I'd like to know where those jobs went. Who did those jobs go to? Because I'm still seeing brothers walk the streets with no job. I'm still seeing sisters walk the street with no job. We still got work to do. This is day 2 of the teacher strike. And if God willing, I'll be back tomorrow to do day 3. God bless you, and I thank you for watching tonight.